I think I literally, it's almost like I've been working a lot on, I've been working a lot on myself for the last couple of years, but over the summer, I really slowed things down so that I could hear my own voice. I could try to just kind of recover from this workaholic life I've been living for the last 2 decades. Yep. And I really had some ahas about myself. And the biggest aha I had was, wow, like I really need everybody around me to be happy so that I can be happy. And then then when I realized that, I started looking at like, okay, if now this is one's really interesting and I'm curious your opinion on, if I'm not fixing, if I'm auto fixing, I love the auto fixing because it's like, you're just doing it. If I'm not fixing, if I'm not in their business all the time, if I'm not trying to control, or I also do like, hey, the situation's bad, just give it to me, I can make it happen. Then who am I? Who is my identity? And I literally got to this place because I'm 54 years old and I'm like, my identity as a parent has changed. My identity as a doctor has changed because I'm not in clinical practice anymore. My identity as an author is changing, as I'm writing new things, as a wife. All these identities that I've finally curated are changing. And I was left with, who am I? And that was a dark place to be.
It is, and actually with HFCs, honestly, I mean, it's really common because we are so relationally based that we know ourselves.
Yeah.
Being mirrored back to us, from others, right? So that's how we know who we are, right? You tell me who I am.
Yep.
I'm a good wife. You tell me who I am. I'm a good mother. I'm present for you. I'm a devoted friend. I'm a whatever. I'm a devoted worker outer. I'm all the things, but it's relationally and behaviorally. And I think that especially perimenopause and menopause, I see a lot in my therapy practice where women just hit a wall of, I can't do this anymore. And you are obviously so not alone in the workaholism, in the getting it all done, being all the things for all the people, taking the burdens off others. Another symptom is we'll sort of minimize our own suffering, our own problems, our own needs. We minimize those. And we jack up the self-sacrificing, right? Where there's a decent amount of self-abandonment that we don't realize because our main goal is to make sure everyone around us is okay. Our main goal is like, that is my goal, but that's not your dharma, right? That's not your soul's journey. And the hyper helping aspect where we go into fields like becoming a therapist, becoming an MD. We go into fields of becoming a triage nurse or whatever, like anywhere where the natural born helper, it's sort of, we get to really shine. So, and from a psychotherapeutic point of view, it's very adaptive, right? So we take this desire to control all things and we go into areas professionally where we can actually really add value to people's lives, as you are doing for millions of people and as I'm doing as well.
Yes.
But the over-functioning piece, right, is the part that when you hit, a lot of times, again, I say menopause because I've seen it over and over, like we are compelled to go above and beyond for people most of the time, right? Both for what they ask for and for what they don't. And it can manifest anywhere. This is at home, at work, personal, professional relationships, like even with someone you've just met, right? Like I literally start the book off with a story of when I was 22, coming back from therapy on Long Island to Manhattan, which is where I was living. And I saw this kid, and immediately my helper radar pinged, like, it's 10:30 at night. What is this kid, as if I'm so old? He's like 19, I'm 22. I'm like, what is this kid doing here in the dark thing at night? And I said to him, oh, hey, where are you going? He's like, oh, I was supposed to be driving a car to Indiana, and I just called the place and they canceled it. So I guess I'm just going. I go, what do you mean? Where are you going? He's like, I'm going to take the train into Penn Station. I'm just going to sleep at the station. I go, wait a minute. You think you're sleeping at Penn Station, buddy? Have you been to New York? He's like, no, I haven't. I was like, hey, man, You can't, it was the 80s too, where New York was super dangerous. I was like, hey, Billy. He goes, well, I don't know anyone in New York. I go, yeah, you do. You know me. I took this 19-year-old to my apartment. I lived in a studio with another friend. Didn't even ask her. I mean, that is, talk about feeling overly responsible for a perfect effing stranger. But I see this with high-functioning codependents where we don't just feel responsible for all the people in our life that we love and we're close to. We feel responsible for clients. We feel responsible for, if you're me, perfect strangers. And I know I'm not alone in that, you know?
Yeah. I want to go back to this idea on menopause because it's interesting from your therapist lens how you're seeing this, because my audience knows I have been talking a lot about how I believe what's happening at menopause is it's like a neurochemical armor is starting to come down, because we're not just losing estrogen and progesterone. If you actually go in and you look at what those two hormones stimulate, they stimulate serotonin and dopamine and GABA, oxytocin, I mean, you have a whole set of neurochemicals that are shifting. And what I think is happening is that all the years of people pleasing, all the years of putting everybody else's needs ahead of your own, you actually are not neurochemically capable of doing that anymore. It's like this armor comes down and all of a sudden you're like, I'm not going to do this. And then when you look at the brain changes that Lisa Mosconi talks about, where the brain actually reorganizes itself and starts to become a brain that sort of sees a bigger picture and we start to focus more on our needs, not everybody's needs. I think what's happening in the mid 40s is it's a lifetime of putting everybody's needs ahead of our own. And we just are now at a place where we're like, I can't do it anymore. But when you look at the spectrum of menopausal women, we got women that are the most common time for women to commit suicide is between 45 and 55, that decade. I think it's this neurochemical armor coming down mixed with what you're talking about, where they're just like, I can't do it anymore. I don't see a way out. So they take themselves out. If you look at divorces over 40, 70% of them are initiated by women. So I think that actually it's those menopausal years that you're stepping into the truest version of yourself. So if that's the case and what can we do as we sort of go, enough, I'm putting down the people pleasing, I'm putting down your needs and I'm picking up my needs. That can feel really uncomfortable. That can upset the people around us. What do we do in that situation?
Expect that when you change the relationship dances you have in your life, people are going to notice. So let's not be surprised when people are upset that we're not willing to do a lot of what we were willing to do. And let's not blame them, and let's not blame ourselves. This is the human nature. When we change something, we feel threatened. Especially, so you're in a relationship, you're in a dyad with someone, and now they change. And now you're afraid, the person who's not necessarily changing or is, experiencing the change is like, are you going to not love me? Right? So I always say, listen, just be prepared that as we change, people are going to notice, and that's okay.